Yes.
All right. So, folks, just a moment from our sponsor, NWSOFA, which stands for Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We are an indivisible chapter in the Northwest Burbs of Chicago. We like to refer to ourselves as the land beyond O'Hare. We're one of 2,500 chapters across the US. Each one of those little dark spots that you're seeing on that US map signifies a new or an existing indivisible chapter. Chapters range anywhere from 10, 15 people to 10,000 folks. We happen to be one of the larger ones across the country. And our goal, one interesting thing, since the new administration has started in January, we are gaining new chapters at 4 to 10 a day. A really interesting thing that was shared by our leaders the other day. So we exist just for real simple purposes to help you understand the facts, to sharpen your arguments, and to communicate to your audience. Many of you are with other indivisible chapters, Move On, 5051, or Democratic groups. We just hope that we bring you that information. Our organization is organized on the dual snowflake principle. You see the two snowflakes out there. On the left side, our communications snowflake, and on the right-hand side, on the right, on the right-hand side is our issue teams. The teams on the well, this thing's got a mind of its own today. We have 10 issue teams. Now we have 19 on the communications team. We have a whole series of new folks that are helping getting the information out. We now have 30 all volunteer chapter leads. 9 of them are not in the NWSOFA area. They are spread throughout the country as part of our 23,000 Zoom attendees and members. An interesting thing that we've been doing lately is we have created our own Substack. Every day you'll see articles being posted, usually summaries from various meetings, and you will see this meeting on our Substack posted later tonight. It will, and it might be tomorrow, but we'll have the AI summary of the meeting, what went on. It will have the videos that we have, the video on this, and we'll have the slides there for people to see and to communicate with and to use. One of the other things that we're doing is we have started something called a link tree. So if you just take a picture or you scan that QR code, it automatically takes you to Linktree, which is a quick way of being able to go into our website, to sign up for our organization, to go to our Substack, to go to our Blue Sky account, and to go to our YouTube accounts. Just a quick thing that's come from some of our new leadership across the area. And last but not least, it's 7:08. We have a full cadre of people that have joined. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark Lundholm, who is the NWSOFA Climate and Environmental Lead. Mark, it is all yours.
Well, welcome everybody. We have 2 presenters tonight who have a history with presenting to us. Mike Zanillo is with Citizens Climate Lobby, and Tim Millburn is a specialist on electric vehicles. Both have presented live presentations back before COVID, so they've been with us for a while, and they both agreed to come on tonight. And I'm hoping again I can get them to present at a future climate change meeting. I think they will. So, but anyway, we're going to start out with, well, let's see, Mike Zanillo is going to start. He's going to present for a while, and then Tim Millburn is going to present a little bit, and we're going to have questions and answers at the end. So put your questions in the chat with a question, and we're going to have raise hands afterwards. Debbie's going to help moderate. So we're getting kind of used to this, and we hope it works out well. Citizens Climate. Well, we'll have Mike Zanillo tell us what Citizens Climate Lobby is. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mike. And Mike, take it away. And thanks again for coming on.
Well, thank you, Mark, for the introduction, and thanks for having me. Thanks, Bill, for inviting me, and thanks, Debbie, for supporting us today. So, as Mark said, my name is Mike Zanillo. I'm a community outreach coordinator with the Citizens Climate Lobby. Been with the organization for almost 10 years now in a variety of roles. And what we're going to talk about for the next 40 minutes or so is the climate change is obviously a very big topic, and there's a lot of ways of addressing it. And I'm sure the fact that you're on this call today, you probably care about it as a topic and have probably done a lot of things personally. But at the end of the day, Citizens Climate Lobby is focused on doing what we can by way of support for advocacy to bring about federal legislation, because beyond what individuals can do to mitigate their own carbon footprint, the problem really is very pervasive. And what we as an organization focus on is what can we do to promote and support policy that goes beyond individual actions that can be ultimately adopted at a federal level in Washington. So just by way of getting right into it, then, if you follow it as a topic, we obviously have kind of done somewhat of a U-turn on support for climate at a federal level over the last few months. And where we, now see things as having shaken out over the last few months is that there have been, major setbacks in a number of areas, both in the regulatory environment, both legislatively with what we used to have by way of tax incentives, just even out and out messaging coming from the administration and whatever. So it's obviously a very changed and difficult environment from where we used to be. But yet, at the end of the day, as an organization, we try to pick up the pieces where they are and try to go forward as best we can. So where we see as opportunities, and we legitimately do believe there are some significant opportunities to still accomplish things at a policy level, is primarily in the list that appears on your screen. And we'll cover most of these, over the next half hour or so. So just to kind of little bit of 3 or 4 slides, just kind of setting the context, because it is a climate change presentation. I'd like to just kind of put a little framing to, our view on the problem that, is kind of consistent with most scientists, is that because of human activity and the burning of fossil fuels, we have realized a significant uptick in the CO2 levels globally that originate from man-made activities, to the point where they are now higher than they have been for the last 10,000 years. And you can kind of see that hockey stick approach on the back end of the chart. And that's in fact what is directly contributing to the warming that we're now experiencing, and is really the key driver, if you will, behind man-made causes for climate change, is this artificial introduction of carbon dioxide. And just to kind of set some broad brush framing to what needs to get done, and we're obviously not going to get into this in any kind of significant detail today, from where we are with the emissions of greenhouse gases, in order to prevent the worst effects of climate change from happening, that the goals that a lot of international organizations have all adopted is to really reduce our emissions by 50% from where they had been by 2030, and really try to target to get to carbon neutrality by 2050. And if we do that, we would hope to put a lid on the amount of warming that we'll experience from man-made activities, to limit the warming to generally 2.7 degrees on average globally. So those are the broad strokes of what we're trying to accomplish. And I know Bill was on this and on the call today, and Bill has, in some social encounters with him, I know has made a comment on this slide, so I figured I'd work it back in. So at the end of the day, the goal is to get to 100% reduction of greenhouse gases. And as you can kind of see here, where most organizations have baselined it as to what the levels were in 2005. And you can see a couple of years ago, we already did achieve a reduction of 17%. And then based on a lot of policies that did get enacted legislatively, we were on a path to get to 40% reduction by 2030, which is, I would label that good, given the fact that the goal was to get to 50% by 2030. So we were on a path, and the key word there is the past tense, were. And again, keeping with the football analogy that appeals to Bill, we had a fumble, and based on a lot of the changes in policy that were adopted by the administration and a lot of aspects that were incorporated into the big, beautiful bill, you now see that we no longer are on a path to realizing that 40 to 43% reduction. And in fact, now there's a lot of estimates, and a lot of people are still chugging the numbers, are saying we probably are on a path of going from where we are now to maybe 24% by 2030, with hoping to get to 28% by 2035. So that's a far cry from the path we were on. And what we're going to talk about is, in the rest of this presentation today, is trying to do the best we can with basically, some setbacks and basically having one arm tied behind our back. So as an organization, Citizens Climate Lobby is focusing its current policy agenda on 4 areas: clean energy permitting reform, healthy forests, building electrification and efficiency, and setting the stage ultimately for carbon pricing. So these are the 4 areas that we see opportunities to kind of apply our advocacy for, and we're going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so. So for clean energy, permitting reform is really where it's all at. That based on just industry trends, just based on cost curves for energy production and a whole bunch of things, and certainly with what we did have in place with the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a lot of momentum building to bring on energy sources. But where the bottleneck is bringing them online and onto the grid. So permitting is really the pacing factor right now. And as you can see on this chart, where we now are producing 230 gigawatts of solar and wind, there's enough in the pipe stream to probably bring us up to 740. So we're going to continue to realize a lot of good growth, but a lot of the opportunities to bring on clean energy plants won't be realized because of the limiting factor not being able to plug them into the grid. And that's where, given the fact that a lot of the sources for wind and solar is far away from urban centers, we really need to focus on how do we get the power from where it makes most sense to be produced to where it's needed. So permitting reform is really the pacing factor now. And it's really so bad that for what is in the pipeline and for what is conceivable and what was being talked about with funding for all the key players in the industry, we may only be able to realize 20% of the opportunity. So infrastructure for moving electrons from where they make sense to be produced to where they're needed is now really only growing by 1% per year. And if you read a lot of things in the press, you know how our energy consumption had been tapering off for a while, but now because of data centers, because of AI, it's expanding at a much faster clip. So that's where the inability to bring clean energy sources online is really going to be a primary area of focus to really achieve the best possible climate outcome that we can. So as you can see on this slide, permitting reform is really that regulatory landscape that is at every level of the equation. It's at a federal level, it's at a state level, it's at a county level, it's at a local level. But in order to build these power lines, you really need to engage multiple governmental units at different scales. And we need to kind of plow through that to get the permission needed in order to produce the infrastructure and the power grid that's needed to take the power from where it's best produced to where it's most needed. And as you can see from a pipeline standpoint, 93% of the pipeline right now is actually wind and solar. So if you can do anything to advance bringing more power in line, more than likely it's going to be a clean energy source. And because we do operate in a political world, one of the oddities of the whole situation is that for a lot of the past policies that enabled us building the recent momentum that we have, an awful lot of the opportunity is actually taking place in red states. So the irony of the whole situation is just as we need more power to come online now, and that power is overwhelmingly going to be clean, uh, there's really a vested interest, if you will, for many of the red states to think this thing through more and not do something that's a knee-jerk reaction because that's what's being said from the top. And there's really a vested interest, if you will, for all states and primarily red states to really think about what should the right position be of them in supporting clean energy sources. So for our, wrapping up on permitting reform, we support, as an organization, we support policies that add to America's capacity to transmit clean energy, speed up the approval process, but keep it in place all the right amount of due diligence to make sure that people can have their voices heard before the approval takes place, and preserve communities' ability to ensure that things are still done properly from an environmental standpoint. So from a legislative snapshot on this particular topic, many bills are churning around in Congress. They've been introduced on a bipartisan basis in both the House and the Senate, both by Democrats and Republicans, but yet there is no critical mass behind any particular set of legislation right now. But yet our assessment is that there still is very likely going to be action taken and still very possible within this Congress before this Congress adjourns at the end of next year. The second area of opportunity that we see for us is in the area of healthy forests. Healthy forests play a role in taking carbon dioxide out of the air on a yearly basis, but then by building out their root structure, they actually can play a key role in sequestering large amounts of carbon that maybe had their source from burning a fossil fuel. So we really think that healthy forests are a key opportunity, as this chart indicates, to really offset 12% of our annual climate pollution, a lot of which may originate from the burning of fossil fuels. But it's really important that we be mindful of the health of the forests because they need to be healthy in order for them to perform their function of taking CO2 out of the air and sequestering it in the ground. So if we don't do what we can for supporting the health of the forest, we inevitably will actually start to decline the capacity of forests to take the CO2 out of the air because the forest ecosystems will become stressed and less efficient than they are now. And we all hear about the amount of wildfires that are taking place at an unprecedented level. And actually, pollution levels now have done a complete U-turn where they're actually going up, not down, largely as a result of the burning of wildfires that are just putting a lot of CO2 and a lot of particulates into the air. So wildfires themselves are worsening because of climate change, because of our current forest management practices, and things like how we suppress fires. So from a science standpoint, there's been a lot of studies done, and a 2023 study has found that controlled burns or thinning of forest conditions can actually result in a healthier forest that at the end of the day helps us take more carbon out of the air and put it safely into the ground. So doing smart things with the forest, which, there is some small amount of, I'll say some amount of controversy on this topic, because some people believe every forest should just be left alone as is. But at the end of the day, that's not actually the smartest or healthiest thing we can do for a forest. We really want to better understand what does it take for the trees in that system to best grow, to best take carbon out, and really be as effective as possible in helping to sequester carbon. So there is a bill that passed the House. It's now actively going through the Senate that we think takes a long step in the right direction. And it's called the Fix Our Forests Act, which the Senate bill is 1462. And it focuses on wildfire mitigation and all those kind of bureaucratic roadblocks that kind of get in the way of managing the forests in the smartest possible way. So that's a huge bill. It has an awful lot of aspects to it, but it basically is mindful of better managing our fireshed management areas, conducting assessments to be more aware of the risks that out of control fire can pose in a certain area, having better data through a registry, setting up intelligence centers, and doing prescribed fires in a smarter, more effective manner. So there's a lot of aspects to this bill that we as an organization see are as net positives. We would not say this is necessarily the perfect bill, but just as we've encountered all the setbacks that we have in the last few months, I think we have to think through things from the standpoint of let's not let perfect become the enemy of the good. So the status of Fix Our Forests Act right now, a version of it did get passed by the House with some amount of Democratic support. The Senate version got introduced in the spring, and just recently, like last week, it was actually the Senate version was passed by the Senate Agriculture Committee. So this is, from our standpoint, is all good news. I will, in full disclosure, say that there are some naysayers on this legislation. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, you'll see some folks like our senator here, one of our senior senator here from Illinois, Dick Durbin, has voted against it in its current form. But we really are doing all we can to kind of just encourage as much of a rethink on this as possible, because we think that it is a solidly good bill, even though it's not a perfect bill. And when you really think through all the aspects of it, it really is a significant step forward in helping to make our forests become a better sponge for the carbon that we are putting into the air on a daily basis through the burning of fossil fuels. A number of organizations besides CCL have stepped forward on this. I'm sure you'll recognize some of these: the Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, Audubon Society. I won't read through all of them. So this bill does have good, solid support, and that's where I think, from a bipartisan standpoint, this is getting traction, because obviously, in order to make it through the Senate, you do need to have bipartisan support to get to that magic number of 60. And that's where we are putting an all-in push right now to try to get this particular legislation over the hump. From a summary standpoint on healthy forests, we would summarize that this bill is good for our forests and the climate. Healthy and forests, as store carbon in a very effective manner. This bill is one of those few areas we can look at that actually sees good, solid bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle, which is why that Senate committee vote was as solidly in favor of it as it was. But it does need help to pass. Passage is not a guarantee because of that 60 threshold I referred to, and that from a citizens climate lobby, we're really seeing this as a nonpartisan opportunity for advocacy to get this win under our belt, and we're hoping to continue to shepherd Senate Bill 1462 forward and bring it to a vote on the Senate, which will then bring about a reconciliation between the House version and the Senate version. Next, the third area that we see as opportunities is building electrification and efficiency. There were an awful lot of aspects to prior, before the big, beautiful bill was passed, when we had the Inflation Reduction Act. There was a lot of things put in place that directly supported electrification, whereas now we obviously are at a point where many of the tax incentives that were in place are either expiring or will be expiring. But yet, at the end of the day, we think this industry has really matured enough where even without incentives, it is just getting more and more feasible and more smart to do things of electrifying your home as much as possible. I know Tim's going to be talking about EVs after this presentation in a few minutes, and that certainly is a key aspect to it. I have an EV, and by way of my overall power, I drive a lot. My power consumption, 40% of my household consumption is in fact for the EV. But if you look at this chart, there's an awful lot of other things you can do with rooftop solar, which still have incentives that have not yet expired, as well as other things to do. So, by way of a setback, this is one of the areas that the doors are closing from a incentive standpoint. Most of the EV tax credits have expired. The solar investment tax credit will be expiring, and there's already is a plan to eliminate something I've always taken for granted, the Energy Star program, as well as a whole lot of other energy tax credits that may still be extending over the next few years, but they're being made much stricter to qualify and much stricter to put in place. One thing I'll just kind of put a plug in for is things like heat pumps. I personally have had a heat pump for a couple of years now, and I would say even without incentives, if you're in the if you're in a position where you have to do some sort of a major upgrade to your heating system, I would encourage you to just get some quotes. I know from my standpoint, it was within 600. I think I saved $600, but some of that was because of the tax savings. Whereas I would say for having replaced my home, which was a 3,200 square foot home with a new HVAC, a heat pump, and a new furnace, it was literally within a few $100s of cost difference between the heat pump version and the traditional solely a gas-fired furnace. And yet the savings per year is almost $700 for me that I'm realizing. So to me, and the reason this is, and I'll kind of move on, is that based on the physics behind things, it basically costs and takes 3 times as much energy to produce a BTU rather than move a BTU. So heat pumps are based on the principle that I can take heat out of the air even on a cold winter day and move it into my house and do the flip thing in reverse. And that's where the efficiency is, because it costs 3 times more energy or 3 times more in money to create that BTU out of burning of an energy product rather than just moving that BTU from inside to outside or vice versa. So from a electrification standpoint, we are going to be working, our organization, in the next few months to try to restore as many provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act as possible, because this big, beautiful bill, I think, dropped out of the sky so quickly that, if you remember that earlier slide that I had with where there is pockets of support in many, many red states, there is an increasing amount of support growing in Republican areas to bring back some of the support that was terminated as a result of the big, beautiful bill. So we are pursuing bipartisan opportunities wherever we see them. Some folks that you wouldn't even associate necessarily with environmental clauses, like Senator Grassley, is one of the staunchest supporters now, saying we need to bring some of these clean energy credits back. So as an organization, we're trying to rally around wherever we see some Republican support and try to build that into being able to repeal some aspects of the big, beautiful bill that just recently got put in place. And the fourth and last area that we'll talk about is an interesting one, and it's the framing of this point I'll make is twofold. One, this is far and away the biggest opportunity, but there's some really interesting near-term opportunities that may not be obvious with this. So as an organization, we have always supported that fossil fuel, dirty-based products should properly reflect their true cost to society that climate change is causing as a result of burning them, and that anything we can do to make the pricing of fossil fuel products more realistic to represent their true cost is a good thing. So carbon pricing, basically operates that there's any number of subsidies right now and things that shield the public from realizing the true cost of burning fossil fuels, and that anything you can do that make that price more apparent and more realistic is a good thing. So putting the price on carbon pollution, we think it is a good thing, and ultimately, of all the climate policy cards you can play, it is far and away the most effective one. What's actually happened that hasn't gotten a lot of press here in the US is that of the 29 developed countries, 28 of them currently have some sort of a carbon price either in place or been passed and will be implemented soon. US kind of stands alone as the only developed country. And if you're looking at this chart and trying to hold me honest, you're going to say, well, why isn't China on here? Well, believe it or not, according to the World Trade Organization, China is still not listed as a developed country. So that's why I can say of the 29 developed countries, 28 currently have a carbon price, with US being the only outlier. We have always advocated for a carbon fee with a carbon dividend, and there may not be any kind of legitimate traction on that at the current time. But we always had, as a third component, place in a border carbon adjustment to adjust for the price of things when they come over the border to properly reflect the price of a product that perhaps was made more cheaply because it was made more dirtily in another country, to kind of put in place a border carbon adjustment to not penalize American companies that in fact have maybe had higher costs because they have a cleaner product. So this kind of ties in with what the EU is implementing, and is now going to be payments are going to be associated with this starting next year. So all the EU countries are now going to effectively have a carbon price put in place, to which will apply to American products when we export them to the EU. So we are going to start paying a border carbon adjustment of sorts when we start sending our products into Europe. So what's actually happening, and it's very interesting from a political landscape, is that, if you think about this, what is this? This border carbon adjustment? That's what we always used to call it. But really what it is, in another name that you can apply to it, is a foreign pollution tariff. So, this is really an opportunity for America, which has a much cleaner landscape to producing things than other countries, that by us penalizing those products that come into the country that are not produced as carbon efficiently because they're coming from a country that doesn't have the same kind of regulatory framework we do, is really an opportunity. And the funny thing is, now with the foreign pollution tariff, is it's actually beginning to develop some significant traction, of all places, led by Republicans. So the Foreign Pollution Fee Act, which is a bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 1325, is really, we find it very interesting. We find that a great first step. So the bill would actually impose a fee on imported goods to reflect the difference in carbon output that product had when it was made outside of this country through a dirty process, compared to its carbon footprint had it been made in the US, and American companies would have had to have more regulatory oversight for it. So we think that this is a very, very good first step, and that this Foreign Pollution Fee Act, which in this particular slide deck, I didn't have the actual senators that supported it, but it is bipartisan, even though it is actually skewed towards Republicans. But we think that this is a very, very good next step that does several things. One, it begins to level the playing field between low carbon companies and high carbon companies that are importing into the US. It begins to show the true cost of carbon pollution, and it really kind of establishes that mindset that says, boy, maybe we really should have the prices of products reflect the amount of damage that is caused by the carbon that gets released from their production. So we're a big supporter of this. We are encouraging a call out to senators and voice support for 1325. So those are the four areas that we're focusing on. And, by way of a roadmap of what we've done throughout the year, and obviously we've had to be pretty nimble and change things because I would imagine a lot of people didn't anticipate the amount of changes that we saw this year with the repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act and adoption of the big, beautiful bill. But we are continuing to plug along. As recently as July, any number of us went to Washington and we held 420 in-person lobby meetings with both Republicans and Democrats. And now we're kind of, turning our attention to those four areas that I just talked about, really focusing first on that push for a forestry package based on Fix Our Forests Act. So in closure, I would say that the areas that we see for climate action at a federal level is in Fix Our Forests Act, permitting reform, and that foreign pollution fee that I just talked about, as well as when we get past this government shutdown that we're currently in, a lot of attention is going to go back to quote unquote normal appropriation bills. And that's, again, we're hoping that we can get some momentum to restore some of the funding cuts that were put in place during the summer and actually try to rebuild some of the support for NOAA, EPA, when we get back to a more normal budgeting process after the shutdown concludes. And we significantly think that there's a Republican opportunity here for them helping push back on clean energy cuts that maybe were included in the big, beautiful bill that now when they're realizing the impact it's going to have, a lot of folks, I think, are having second thoughts about maybe voting on what they did as comprehensively as they did back in July. We are all about contacting Congress, so I know this is an audience that goes beyond Northern Illinois, but this is a slide that I use when I'm presenting here locally, that these are the representatives that we would encourage you reaching out to. At the bottom of the slide is a URL that you can go to find your representative wherever you are in the country. And, we really encourage phone calls more than anything else that really, there's a lot of different ways of contacting Congress. A lot of times, I'm sure a lot of you get the email clicks, and those are, interesting and helpful. But nothing really has an impact as much as picking up the phone, and that's where we think, the best opportunity to have your voice heard is by finding, who represents you, and then calling up as a constituent and encouraging support for a bill or a policy that is consistent with what you want. We have an action slide. Bill said he's going to send something out. I'll make sure this is in the deck. But if you go to that URL that's at the top of the slide, we've got a facilitated system that allows you to either easily contact your senator or your congressperson, or do other things like using social media to get the word out and whatever. So with all that, I'll thank you all. And I think I ran just maybe 1 or 2 minutes long. And I think, Bill, at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Tim.
Or,
You woke me up.
Tim, or are we going to take questions and answers? I can't remember what we decided to do. Do you want to take questions first? But
at the end of the presentation?
At the end? Okay, we can do that. So this is an interesting tie-in. So as you heard, Mike has a heat pump system, heating cooling system in his house. He also has solar panels. He drives EV. He's really expert on that stuff too. And so is Tim Millburn, our next presenter, who's a specialist in EVs and can answer some of the questions that some of you might have on that. But let's have Tim take it away. And Tim's focus is going to be more focused on the state of Illinois, but I'm thinking probably there's a national connection to all of this. So with that said, Tim, it's your turn. Take it away.
Thank you, Mark. You can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, so as Mark introduced, I'm going to be talking, I'm calling it ABCs. I will do a couple of deep dives. My goal here is to try and introduce those that may be not that familiar with EVs, but also talk about some of the things that if you're thinking of getting an EV or putting in an EV charger, some of the realities that you probably don't get, kind of talking to a dealership. So I want to give you some background on what to look for and why. So I just also before I get into this, I got an EV in 2014. It was a Chevy Volt. I had it for 10 years. I used to charge it with a wireless charger. It was on my garage floor. In 2024, I got a Chevy Blazer EV. It goes about 280 miles on a charge. I do almost all my level 2 charging at home, but I have solar on the house, so I actually charge during the day. I charge my EV with solar. I'm also very active in the transportation electrification world. I'm on the board of directors of the U.S. Department of Energy's Illinois Alliance for Clean Transportation, which used to be called Chicago Area Clean Cities. I'm also the project technical advisor for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus EV Readiness Program. And this is a book I wrote. I'm going to give you a link to it, but it's something I've become very passionate about. I pay attention to the vehicles, the charging, the laws, the policies, et cetera. So I'm going to cover a lot of that. So to start off, it's just a baseline. Let me move something out of the way here. As many of you probably aware, and tying into what Mike's saying, we are 5% of the world population, and we're a big energy hog. We generate almost 30% of the carbon emissions, and obviously we need to find ways of dealing with that. And one of the things that changed, so there was a lot of legislation on solar renewables, and in 2016 we kind of crossed this line where the power industry was generating less carbon dioxide than the transportation sector. So in subsequent bills, federal and state of Illinois, we've started focusing on transportation. And, it basically, originally it was kind of driven by the the petroleum independence to go to electricity. There's a lot of rationale. In my mind, it's about global climate change, period. But at the same time, if it allows us to cut down on petroleum independence, great. Obviously, there's air quality emissions, tailpipe emissions. One of the things that people when they're supporting it, they say there's a lot of economic development. We get a lot of jobs and cash flow, and the other guys say it's bad for the economy. No, it's good for the economy. And there's also an opportunity, and because we're going to be pumping a lot more electrons through the grid to optimize the electrical power assets, which is ongoing in Illinois, as we referred to. So looking at what's been going on in the EV, the vehicle side. Up until about 2020, it was almost all light duty passenger EVs. And starting a few years ago, there started to be a few pickups and SUVs, vans, and the schools started getting into refuse trucks. And as we go forward, and I pay attention to all the fleet activities, pretty much they're trying to electrify every vehicle and even including railroads and cement trucks. And, they're looking into the economics of it and certainly delivery trucks and such. So we're moving into that stage, which has some impact on the grid and the capacity. So before we get into some of the kind of ideas on what to do, I want to baseline make sure everybody's comfortable with some of the terms. I don't want to start throwing around too many acronyms. And so basically there's 4 acronyms we talk about: ICV, HEV, BEV, and PHEV. Many of you are probably familiar. Internal combustion engine is basically what we've been driving forever. You have a fuel tank and an engine. It takes gasoline. Then you've got the hybrid electric, which its primary fuel is still gasoline as an engine, but there's a battery that recovers energy through regenerative braking that increases the fuel efficiency by 25 to 40% compared to a counterpart of an internal combustion engine only. And then there's a kind of a mix of the two where you do have gasoline, but you do plug it in as well. So you actually have both fuel sources. This is the plug-in hybrid. Basically, it has the energy recovery and the regenerative braking, but you can start charging the battery again if you run out of battery by turning on the engine. And then the last one is a battery electric, or sometimes called all electric, which it's only got a power source, which is electricity in a battery. Just a little more on the plug-in hybrid. You can run on either fuel. It is primarily electricity. It's zero tailpipe emissions when you're running on battery only. What people like about this is you've got the internal combustion engine, which relieves range anxiety, and they also provide a good long warranty. On the other hand, the battery electric or the fully electric is 100%. They've got them up to, actually, there's some that are out 500 miles now, zero tailpipe emissions, extremely quiet. In fact, my car, my Chevy Blazer, it's basically, it makes a noise so you can hear it. It's like a recording. Very low maintenance and the same kind of battery warranty. So this is actually the direction a lot of people are heading. Just some more background on the EV charging. So there's three basic groupings or levels. And what the industry calls the EV charger or the EV charging station, kind of the term of art is called electric vehicle supply equipment, or EVSE. That's the term that people in the business use. A lot of people call it charging station. The reason that the industry uses the EVSE is because there's actually a charger on board a vehicle. So they try and differentiate the onboard from the offboard when they call it the EVSE. So either works. And there's three levels: level 1, 2, and then a lot of people call level 3. I prefer DC fast charging. Level 1 and level 2 provide AC from the building into the charger, and then out of the charger is AC, whereas DC is AC into the charger and DC out, and that's direct current and alternating current. So the big difference, of course, is the voltage and the amperage. So basically, the power ranges for the level 1 is 1 to 2 kilowatts, which is proportional to the range. Range miles, actually, are MPH. Range miles per hour is 3 to 6. So if you plug in for 8 hours, you might get, say, 40 miles overnight. And it's typically used in people's homes. And if you only drive 30 or 40 miles a day, this works fine. Most people who have an EV go to a level 2, which is either 208 or 240 volts, which is available. The 240 volt is available in all normal homes. And you've got this higher power level, and you can get from 25 to 80 range miles per hour. And those are also most of the public chargers you see. And then there's the DC fast charge, also called the level 3. That's typically 480 volts and above. And you can see the range down there. It's now up to 600 range miles per hour. We're getting close to the same kind of speeds that you can fill up a gasoline tank. So this is something of interest to these interstate chargers or fleets or retail trucks and such, which they need a fast fill. So just to make sure you understand, this is kind of the realm. And then this is just putting it in a slide all in one place. So 1, 2, 3, and here's the range miles, the volts, and the amps. Another thing that's becoming, I'll say, more critical is the connector. So since 2009, if you did a level 1 or level 2 charge for a US vehicle, you used one of these called J1772. Maybe some of you have seen those. If you go to the DC fast charger, in the US vehicles, it's called a CCS1, which is the Combined Charging System 1. And then there's something called a CHAdeMO, which the Japanese vehicle is used for DC charging. And Tesla was using the one on the right. And it's also, they use it for AC and DC charging. So what's happened this year is the US standards, the J1772 is being replaced by this J3400, which is the same as the Tesla. It's also called NACS, which is called North American Charging Standard. So we are heading to this charger here, and it's coming into vehicles as we speak, and most of the major charging companies provide this as an option right now, and I'd say in a year or two, it will become the standard. So if you're thinking of buying a new car, pay attention to the connector, and if you're going to buy a charger, you want to make sure you get one that hooks up. And not to worry too much, there is an adapter that you can go from any of these to the other thing except for the Japanese. So there are ways of using older chargers in newer vehicles and vice versa. But you know, if it's a home charger, you want to get the right one. The other thing is just in anticipating getting an EV, basically it's fairly straightforward, the wiring. So you'll have one of these standard connectors that hooks up in a cable through some sort of standard connection that does two things. It provides power and it communicates. So for example, it won't let you drive the car away when it's plugged in. It communicates how much electricity is going through. And then you have two options to connect to the facility power. One is you have what's called a NEMA plug and a NEMA receptacle, which is like a dryer outlet. NEMA is the National Electric Manufacturing Association. So it's a standard plug, or you can hardwire it right to the building. And there's some advantages and disadvantages of both. With the NEMA plug, you can take the charger if you move. Hardwire has fewer electrical requirements. So let's say all of you are going to go out and look for EVs tomorrow. I want to give you some ideas on how to do that. I'm not going to go through all these links, but if you upload this from the OFA site, you'll be able to get to these. There's a number of things. There's something called the AFDC, which is over on the right, Alternative Fuels Data Center. It's the U.S. Department of Energy. And they actually, it's interesting, after January, they put up a new website, which was an improvement. I was a little surprised. I thought they were going to shut it down. But anyways, it's a good website. Anyways, they give you a lot of resources out there with these links. The advanced vehicle search is what I'm going to point to and show you a quick example of. There's also this Plugstar and these other ones, just good resources if you're shopping. And then there's the consumer reports and some other things. And this one down here will actually tell you what's available in each state, because not all models of all manufacturers are available everywhere. So this is kind of just if you want to shop, this is some good resources. There's also each of these used vehicle dealers, they have EV sites, more reports and reviews. And then here's a couple ideas if you want to look at the true cost of ownership. Fueleconomy.gov has been doing this for a long time now. You can compare an EV with an ICE vehicle or another EV, et cetera. So for those that do that kind of shopping, these are some good links. And so this is the alternate fuel and advanced vehicle search. You can look up natural gas and propane too, but this case I was looking at electric vehicles. So you just pick the type of vehicle. You can pick a particular vendor. I just picked all of them, and it basically lists, in this case, 121 vehicles, which was sedans and SUVs, electric plug-in hybrid for 2025, and then there's a supporting database that goes with it. So it's a lot of good information, again, if you're shopping, and then you can pick up to 4 different ones and compare them in one place. So it's just a good tool to see what you're up against. The MSRP, as well as some of the other kind of key factors when you're shopping. And then this is something on that same site. It's an all-in-one, it's like a 7-page document that lists every EV, sedan, and passenger vehicle sold in the US with all its features. And the link's up here if you want to take a look at it. But it's sort of like a good place maybe to start. It's got everything that's in the other data. So you can look here with everything, and then you can use the advanced vehicle fuel search to filter. So it's a good site. The other sites I mentioned have similar tools, but it's a good place. One of the things that since January that I've heard people, they get nervous about what's going to happen. And I'm actually still bullish on EVs. And if you look at, there's 20 million EVs been sold since 2010 and globally, 3 million in the US. We're now, depending on what state, but we're 8 to 10% of the new vehicle sales. Illinois, in the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, the governor stated we're targeting 1 million EVs by 2030. We had 4 years to go, and we're at 152,000 as of last month. It's not impossible. It's a good goal, but 2 years ago we were at, I think, less than half of that. So it boils a lot down to the availability of infrastructure. There's also a number of major cities and countries and automakers that are eliminating internal combustion engine vehicles between now and 2035. Notwithstanding some of the changes politically, but I think, in Europe and certainly in China, they're all in. And so it's going to happen, and I think it's still going to happen here. One of the other things is the OEMs here, like GM has already made a bunch of investments. Ford has too, retooling. They're moving forward with EVs. So it's a tough thing for them to do. But I think they also look, at some point in time, there'll be a different set of rules in the White House. The other thing, just because you follow this, going back from 2020, this is basically showing U.S. sales by month. So you can see it's pretty much just keeps going. Now it's saying it's 9% of new vehicle sales, and it's on the order. I guess there was 1 month. I think the end of last year, there was 150,000 vehicles, EVs sold in a month. And then this is a forecast by Bloomberg, which is basically saying that by 2040, we're going to be 54% of the new sales will be EVs. People still be buying ICE vehicles. But the point is, this is, and these guys pay a lot of detailed attention, and they haven't changed their forecast yet. The point is, this is, where we probably are heading, but it is a crystal ball. The other thing I like to do is dispel some of the myths. People are apprehensive, and a lot of it in my mind falls under the, you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of it, the number one thing is range anxiety, and the ability to find charging stations. And the EVs have been a lot more expensive without incentives, and there was concern about reliability and performance. So what we need to do, in the effort to do it, is get more charging stations up, getting people more aware and more accurately aware, making sure the vehicles and the charging stations are available, and promote home charging. So on the range anxiety, almost everybody who has an EV charges at home. Now, people who live in the city, multiple families, it's tougher, but they do find ways of charging near home. And the other thing is, most people only drive fewer than 40 miles, 80%, which 40 miles with a level 2 charger is an hour and a half of charging. So it's not onerous. The other thing that there's fast charging networks in place, and there's more and more. This is the biggest growth area in the market, is the level 3s or the DC fast. The Tesla now, you can recharge almost 200 miles in 15 minutes. Most of the vehicles now have between 250 and 500 mile ranges. So we're not going to need a charging station everywhere or every shopping center. But being an EV driver, you need to pay attention. You need to plan your trips along interstates and find hotels that have them. More and more hotels are putting them in. And this whole idea of charging ubiquity is still coming, especially on the interstate. So as you may have heard, the Trump administration shut down the NEVI program, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which allocated $5 billion, and of which Illinois got $149 million. The states sued, like 20-some states sued, including Illinois, and they reinitiated it at the end of August. So it's the Federal Highway Administration has now brought this back to life, which is marvelous, because this is the biggest program that will get range anxiety knocked out. That it'll have every 50 miles on every interstate, you will have 4 150 kilowatt chargers. And the government will pay for up to 80% of that. Illinois also, we've had with the VW mitigation program, I'll talk about in a second, and the Illinois charging rebate, and now we have ComEd programs that are going to add several thousand level 2 chargers for public, and maybe 1,000 or 1,500 DC fast chargers in Illinois, not counting for the interstate chargers necessarily. So there is still a lot of funding available and a lot of work that's already going on. Illinois has quite a few chargers. So the other thing people get worried about is the battery energy capacity, particularly with respect to cold. And if you've got a plug-in hybrid, it's not an issue. But there are they say the three T's: temperature, technique, and terrain. If this is showing that this is a percent of maximum range, so at somewhere around 80 degrees is you get your best range, 80 degrees ambient. And either above it or below it, it falls off. Now this is actually kind of an old curve. Some of the newer vehicles have been able to reduce that slope. Like the Nissan Leaf back 10 years ago, if it went 100 miles at 80 degrees, it would go like 60 miles or 50 miles at 0 degrees. And that's all changed. It's more like 80 as I understand it. So depends on the vehicle. The other thing that people say, well, how do I find a charger? I don't know where there's a charger. It's a lot easier to find a charger than it is a gasoline station in my mind. So these are all links here. You've got, in my car, I use the Google Maps. I just say, hey, Google, find me a charger, and it'll find me a charger. They've got apps on the phone, apps on your vehicle, and then these are some links that you can use if you choose. But there's also PlugShare does something where you can say, I'm going from here to Los Angeles, and it'll map out every fast charger in between and allow you to plan a route. You can also make reservations to some of them. And so they're really making it easier to find it. And this is just an example of a PlugShare map where you pull up I'm in Park Ridge, so I pulled up that zip code and this showed all the chargers. You can zoom in and find what you need. It's also got some other filters depending on if you have a preference on the network that's being used, and also you can get pricing information. Oops. The other thing that is kind of going away was the cost element. So for the last several years, to go to a dealership and find a counterpart of a gasoline vehicle and an EV, it was clear that the EVs cost more. That's not always the case now. And so the Nissan Leaf and the Chevy Bolt are now about 30,000, which is comparable to a counterpart. Tesla's coming out with a vehicle, their Model C or Model M. They haven't released the name, but it's going to be 18,000 for a vehicle, a battery electric that goes 250 miles. They're going to drive the market. There's also a good used vehicle market that has some affordable cars. And the other thing that has to go into your thinking is typically an EV doesn't have spark plugs or oil or belts. And it's typically rated at about a 30% less maintenance cost. And the fuel cost is depending on the price of gasoline, but somewhere 25 to 35% per vehicle mile driven. So if it's 20 cents to drive a mile on gasoline, it's 5 or 6 cents on an EV. So the big factor that's happening is this cost parity question. So when you look at the Bolt and the Leaf and in particular the Tesla, since 2010, the cost of the battery pack has dropped from over $600. Tesla's saying they're down below $150 now, and some of the other OEMs are. All the big OEMs are opening up or partnering up with big battery factories. GM's got their Ultium factory, and Tesla's got their Gigafactories. They're getting these costs down, and this is how they're getting the cost parity. So once they hit that, to me, it's a game changer because now you got a car that's quieter, doesn't produce any CO2, costs the same or even less, and has an operational cost that's a third. So it's pretty clear once we get there. The last thing I think here is this the performance reliability. They've been around for 15 years now, and there were some bugs at the beginning. These are heavily software controlled. They kind of started with a clean sheet of paper. They are, in my mind, they are faster, more acceleration and torque. They're quieter, smoother. They're better handling and more fun to drive than an ICE vehicle. So to me, if this is of interest, go to a dealership and test drive one and see if I'm wrong, because it's kind of fun to go through that exercise. They've got 10% of the moving parts of an ICE vehicle, and they typically now they're getting to go to up to 80% of the battery capacity is a warranty up to 160,000 on some vehicles. So they're getting more confidence. I also know, like on my brakes, I don't use my brakes very often because the regenerative braking, the dealer said I should be able to get 180,000 miles on a pair of brakes, a set of brakes. The other one that people get worried about is range, and this is one of those areas I'd like to kind of give you my insights. So the range factors relate not just on the size of the battery, although that's very important, but also on what's called the acceptance rate and the efficiency rate, which is a design of the vehicle. Then there's the EVSE, the charger. How fast can you move electricity through it? And are you sharing power with another charger? And then sometimes, like if you're in a multifamily unit or a commercial building, the facility may have limited power that reduces the amount of electricity you can use unless you power share, which again, that gets into how much power you can deliver. So if you look at the typical range, so on the left, you've got, this is the power. Kilowatts is the factor we're trying to focus on. And that's what determines range miles per hour. It is basically, it's a formula that however many kilowatts you can convert right away to range miles. And so this is showing level 1, they only go up to 5 or 6 kilowatts. So you're only getting, as I said before, 3 to 6. Level 2 gets you up higher. And then the DC fast charge has a wide range of amperages and power that can get you up, and showing here 625 range miles per hour. So just to give you a sense, it's not as simple as one number. The thing that I want to emphasize here is something called acceptance rate. So like a Chevy Bolt can only take 7.7 kilowatts. My car, Chevy Blazer, can take 11.5 kilowatts. Most cars can take 11.5 kilowatts. There are a few out there that can take 19. And there's actually 22 is the maximum by code. And it's determined by the onboard charging system. So it basically says, I've got so much power coming in, I will not accept any more. So that's the acceptance rate. And it's basically, there's one for the AC if you're charging with a level 1 or level 2, and there's one for the DC if you're charging on a DC. And it's a different system, but it does the same thing. It allows only so much power at such a rate, and that's called the acceptance rate. So you can get a really powerful charger, and if your vehicle doesn't take it, you can't charge any faster than your vehicle allows. So the point is, if you're going to buy a charger and an EV, you want to have them kind of compatible. And this just gives you an idea. This is level 2 and DC fast charge. I've just got a listing here. What I want to point out here is these have an acceptance rate of 11.5 kilowatts, which is becoming the norm. 5 years ago, it was 7.7. Now it's 11.5. It may go up, it may not, I don't know. And then on the DC fast charge, this is sort of the race that's going on. Certainly on the luxury vehicles, you can see this Lucid can go up to 350. Some of the Teslas can too, but the Chevy Bolt can only do 55. So just be aware of it if you're purchasing an EV, and because you can pull up to a 350 kilowatt charger, and on a Bolt, you'd only be able to pump in 55. So the other thing is the recharge efficiency rate. So I liken it to miles per gallon. So that used to be, or still is, one of the primary parameters when you purchase a vehicle is how many miles per gallon. It's the same thing, but it's called miles per kilowatt hour. A kilowatt hour is a unit of energy, as is a gallon of gasoline is a certain amount of energy. So what's happened in the last few years is, like Tesla in particular, they've taken and they're improving the efficiency of their vehicle models, and the subsequent years are better. And you can see here, like the Tesla Model 3 gets 4, but you're down here, the Audi e-tron only gets 2.33. And that's a 2021. So the newer vehicles are going to have better performance. So right now you can see a range of 2 to 5 miles per kilowatt hour. What that means is for the same vehicle, that would take them 2.5 times as long to get the same number of miles when they're parked charging. So that's the thing, is this is a big selling feature. It says how fast you can charge your vehicle at the same kilowatts. Also, if you're getting a pickup or like a Silverado or a big SUV, it's a lower number. And then if you get into the larger trucks and buses, it's even lower. So you don't get as, it's consuming more energy per mile. But just, this, I'm talking over here on the right about passenger vehicles. This is putting that same data into another form. This chart here. This is it wasn't on the other page. This NEO-ANVO is claiming 5.6 miles per kilowatt hour versus, this 2021, which is 2.5. So it's half. And on the lower left here, it's saying that the Tesla Model 3 in 2025 is 5.4, and in 2022 it was 4. So, and that's happening, I think, with a lot of the vehicles. And what it means is, for a given situation, you need less time to get the same number of miles, probably with the newer versions of a car. So that's a question to ask at a dealership. So this is basically showing that the model itself, if you've got different range miles per hour, this is these 3 colors. So this would be a low, a medium, and a high. It's basically saying there's a range of range miles per hour per kilowatts delivered. And this goes down to the individual vehicles. I do a lot of work in multifamily, and I would typically pick an average, because one person is going to have a different amount of miles when they wake up in the morning for the same amount of time they plugged in. And so this allows us to kind of plan for it. Yeah, this is kind of the same thing. And so the other thing, that when you get into the DC fast chargers, it's different than the level 2s. The level 2 is pretty much a linear. So if you get in a certain number of amps or kilowatts, it will charge proportionately. With the DC fast charging, the vehicles themselves have a throttle. When you get to 80%, it's almost like somebody put on the brakes. If you're watching your car and it hits 79, it hits 80, the rate it's receiving the electricity, it drops off, and it's to protect the battery. But you can see that, this is, if this were a passenger vehicle, up to 80%. That's why I picked that. They actually now have MWC, which is megawatt chargers, 1,000 kilowatts. It's really fast. There's no passenger vehicles that can take it, but fleet vehicles and buses, I think, that's what's going to be using that. But this is how fast. So it's saying you could get 1,200 range miles per hour, which is faster than you'd fill up, or about the same as a gasoline refill. So that's sort of a if you will, a magic number. And they differentiate. They call the over 200, they call them high power charging, and then for the passenger vehicles, and then you get the megawatt charging. But the thing to know is, if you're driving a bigger vehicle or a fleet vehicle, it pushes the whole curve down because of what I said before, because of the efficiency. And just to kind of put it together and to show kind of some history, so back when it all started, they might have had an acceptance rate of something like 5 or 6 kilowatts, and now you've got up at I've got it here, it's 15, and then the recharge rate has gone from something low up to 5. And this is just showing how, and both of these are improving, if you will, the performance, the the recharge efficiency, and the speed of charge. And if you look at the average time to recharge 100 miles from 2009, when it all got started, we've gone from something like 14 hours down to maybe 4 hours, because of the improvements in the acceptance rate, and because of the improvements in the recharge efficiency. And that's going to continue to go down. It's going to be a major, I think, differentiator between different OEMs. So just some more links that might be of interest. So this acceptance rate and the miles per kilowatt, these are some links. If you were looking at a particular model, you should be able to look it up here. It's got some technical specs. And the last one's for trucks, if anybody's interested. And then AFDC has something that's about availability. So you can go out and find out, yeah, I found a vehicle I like, but can I get one? So that's what that's for. Another thing that comes into the range, as I mentioned, is a battery. So what really drives is the number of charge cycles, how many times you fill it up and discharge it, and also how far down you discharge it and how high you fill it up. Most of the vehicles have a base. They don't go below 20% state of charge or 20% full on the batteries. It's controlled by the vehicle, but they do allow you to adjust the upper level, the upper state of charge. And most of the OEMs will say, don't go over 80% unless you have to. And if you do it a lot, if you did it every day, your battery would have a negative effect. So that's kind of the charging habits. A lot is going on in battery design and materials. Right now, as I'm sure you know, there's the lithium ion has been kind of the everything for everybody, and Tesla's talking about going to an aluminum base or a sodium base. They're changing the geometry. They're going to solid state. The Japanese are doing that, and if we can get to solid state, basically, they're saying right now it's still expensive, but the costs will go down, and it's going to be safer. The whole concern about lithium ion fires will go away. So to me, that's where all the innovation is of importance. It's going to drive down costs. It's going to increase reliability and safety. We're not there yet, but I see it coming. I see a lot of stuff that says it's here, but nobody's selling it yet. I think Toyota is going to be the first one to do it. The other thing is the battery temperature. So what shortens the life of the battery is when you start it up hot or start it up cold. So anymore, they have what's called a battery thermal management system. There's a little diagram here which you run a fluid through the battery pack to either cool or heat the battery before you drive it. And it will extend the life of the battery as well as it can improve the miles that you get. Because if it's really cold, if you didn't have this, it would get fewer miles. If you can preheat it, you'll get more miles. They claim, and this is, I think, a Tesla thing, they think they have a 1,000,000-mile battery. Again, it's not out there. It's Tesla's way to say something before they do it. But the point is, I think the day will come where, we're now, fighting over 250 to 500 miles. I saw an 800-mile EV at a show. They're talking about, and this isn't going 1,000,000 miles on one charge. This is a lifetime of 1,000,000 miles. But so both things are the life of the battery as well as the range. It's all going to go up. There's a lot of promise in that area. Okay, the money. So this is basically for those that are thinking about it. The EV rebate program for state of Illinois started today. It will run till the end of January. I would not wait till the end of January. The last time they did this, I applied the first day and I got $4,000 from the state, but I think it lasted 6 weeks and they ran out of money. So if you're thinking about an EV, this is good, and you want to take advantage of this. They also changed it so that for a personal EV, you get $4,000 if it's a lower income, and otherwise it's $2,000. And the lower income credit is determined by the county. The link will tell you the specifics. There's also you have to be less than 5 times the property line, and the vehicle has to be less than 80,000. And there's only $14 million to play with. There's also a charger rebate program, which they've had 2 tranches that they've allocated $38 million. There's still money left. This is part of the Climate Equitable Jobs Act. And those rebates cover up to 80% eligible project for installing charging stations. So they should be announcing something in the near future. And I'm guessing that when they're done, they might have added 300 DC fast chargers and maybe 1,000 level 2s. So from the range anxiety and ubiquity, this is a good program. There was also the VW mitigation program, which check it. Yeah, I'm getting close here. VW had to pay $15 billion for cheating on their emissions, and Illinois got $108 million towards charging and vehicles, and we've spent it all. And there's quite a few lawsuits that have gone into it, and a good number of DC fast chargers. So that's a good program. The federal incentives, as I think Mike said, they ended a couple weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now. There's a personal alt-fuel refueling property tax credit, which is good through June of next year. You get 30% up to 1,000, but you have to be income eligible. And there's something for the commercial side, you can get 30% up to 100,000 through June of next year also, but you have to have income qualifications. I mentioned the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. It is back in play. I haven't heard anybody get any funding yet, but this is very new. You get 80% of the total installed cost for DC fast charge, 150. It has to be on an alternative fuel corridor, which is basically an incentive. We got 147 million. I mentioned this before. We sued and got our wheels back in action. Sorry. There's also something called the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program, which is kind of non-interstate chargers. And Illinois was awarded 3 allotments of $15 million, and the funding's been put on hold in February. There are some movements on the first group, which is the state of Illinois. The rest is still on hold. We're hoping it will pick up. And there were other programs with the Department of Transportation for like buses and freight and rail that's also been put on hold. For those that are incentive nerds, there's 2 good websites, the AFDC Search of Federal and State Laws and the Database of State Incentives for Renewables and Efficiency called Desire. These are links you could go look. The one that's probably the most relevant to this group is the ComEd. They have their electric vehicle charger residential installation rebate program. Starting January 1st, there's $2,500 for the lower income and $1,000 standard towards the installation. And there's also a make-ready program for businesses, public sectors, and schools, which also includes multifamily. So it's $750 for lower income per charging port and $5,000 for standard per charging point, and it starts January 1st. The last section here, I just want to give you a flavor as to what's coming next. First one, you may have heard of this, vehicle to X, where X is the vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, vehicle to business. And you can have it for power backup. You can do that now, depending on the charger. The vehicle to grid is the big one, so you can sell your electricity to the grid, just like solar net metering. ComEd's kind of dragging their feet on this. It's not a straightforward thing, but it's coming. It will happen, and it's something to pay attention to. If you're going to buy a charger, you probably want it to be V2Grid or V2X enabled. The other one, which is something that's that I have done kind of by default, is I have solar and an EV charger, solar powered EV. So it does, when it's a sunny day and I'm charging, it's great. And what you'd want to do is make sure that it's, you anticipate having an EV charger, estimate the load included on the area of your array. The other thing that's now becoming more available, they're going to start up again next year. It's stationary energy storage. So the thing to think about is that the battery in your car is a storage system. So is like a Tesla Powerwall and so some other ones that are out there. And you can tie that into the net metering. You can have the solar power, take it on and optimize your expenditures. And they generally call this, when you tie it to the vehicle, also the mobile energy storage, they term it the vehicle power export equipment. And so the ultimate goal is you have solar, you have stationary energy storage, you have mobile energy storage, and you optimize your costs with the grid. And that's the software's there. Argonne has a great setup to do this if you ever get a chance. And this is kind of more of the same. It's basically, you can also use it as a backup. You can do just solar and storage. You can just, any combination thereof. So this is available in some extent. The last one on the list here is plug and charge. This is something which is not yet available, but it's a new standard. Basically, you pull up to an EV charger. It could be the one in your home, or sorry, it could be any public charger, any retail charger. You pull in. Effectively, the charger knows your car, and it does a handshake electrically or through Bluetooth. And it says, this guy has an account, and all you do is plug in. You don't have to have an RFID card or a cell phone app. It knows the car. And you can do this in a multifamily situation too. One other thing that if anybody's involved with particular municipalities, in Illinois, as of a year and a half ago, this public act, this electric vehicle charging act, you are required under any new construction, multifamily, single family residential, to have EV capable for all spaces, which basically means you have to have conduit and wiring running to the spaces. You don't have to have a charger installed, but the facility is ready basically to do that. And there's something called the Illinois Energy Conservation Code, which is mandatory in all 50 states. And basically probably the next version, 2026, is going to have what's called an all-electric home, which has EV ready, which means you would actually have, you'd have the wires running to an empty box, solar ready, which doesn't have to have panels, but you have to have a conduit going up your roof, and you have to have a space in your basement or whatever. And electric ready, which is more or less what Mike showed in that one graphic of all the electrical appliances in your home. So we are heading towards a greener code. This hasn't happened yet, and I don't know what's going to happen with the federal stuff, but this is the direction that anybody involved is trying to head it. This is just some more links you might be interested in. There's some toolkits that ComEd offers. I'm not going to go through them all. And then this is, if you go out to this link here, which is my website, there's a book on EV readiness decision guide, which has a lot of resources in it. And then the last thing here is I would ask you to put on your to-do list to test drive an EV if you're anywhere near getting a new vehicle, or if you're just curious. If you find something you like, call the dealer, see what's involved in getting one availability-wise. See if your employer might be interested in workplace charging, and reach out to your elected leaders to know that you support what they're doing already and what we need to be doing. So with that, I will end it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Mike. And boy, we have lots of questions. And I think this is a nice combination presentation. There's a lot of information for people. And there are a bunch of questions out there. So Debbie, do you want to start lining them up?
Well, I can. I certainly can. Okay, Andrea is asking, I tried to get solar. They weren't willing to finance solar panels because my home isn't worth $100,000. This is when essentially me being part of a solar farm. Are there other plans out there? She's in Johnstown, PA.
So is she? She's in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Mike, any ideas? I am not an expert out in Pennsylvania. In our area, there was a lot of support for community solar, so that you can pick an electrical supplier who basically owns a farm, and you can participate in buying your power from that farm. How that works in Pennsylvania, I'm not familiar.
I know I've signed up with Nexamp here in Illinois, and I'm very happy with it. So that's one.
Okay. I will go to Andrea's next question. Would it be helpful, for example?
Hang 1 second, real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm reading an article from May. It says community solar bill passes Pennsylvania House after years of stalemate. It looks like, I don't know if it's passed both houses, but she should investigate, or your friend should investigate if it did pass, because at least in Illinois, they can't say just because your house isn't worth a certain amount. They don't really care about the value of the home. They care about how much the electricity you're using. So I wouldn't give up hope.
Yeah. Well, there's some hope for you, Andrea. Maybe you can check into that to see. Her other question, would it be helpful, for example, to use growing hemp for carbon capture sequester?
Yeah, I don't know.
The answer that I understand is yes. It's I mean, if you're going to capture some carbon now, is this person growing anything besides the hemp?
Unknown.
Yeah, it gets interesting when you go beyond that, but when you talk to somebody about using hemp, for example, as a building material,
Yeah.
they always talk about some credit for the carbon capture. So,
I think
Okay.
Canada is very big in growing hemp, and it's a great cash crop from what I hear. So we should be doing it, but
We will see. Susan has a question. If forests sequester 12% of our pollution, what else absorbs the other 88%?
Well, that's part of the problem. A lot of it doesn't get captured. Some of it gets picked up by our oceans. And I forgot what the actual number is, but for all the excess carbon dioxide that we're putting into the air from burning fossil fuels, I think somewhere on the order of 60% of it gets absorbed in our oceans, which is why they're turning more acidic and doing as much damage to coral reefs and the whole food supply of oceans. The rest just builds up in the atmosphere to a large extent. And that's why we have something like 55% more CO2 in the air than we used to have before the Industrial Revolution. So it's not. That's a problem. Is that it isn't. It's just building up in our atmosphere. And a lot of folks would tell you that the amount of CO2 once in the atmosphere will likely stay there anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years.
Okay, thank you. Amy has two questions. One is, how would FOFA address the recent allowing Alaska refuge to be usurped by big oil?
Well, I mean, there's no direct connection between those two things. Fix Our Forests Act is targeted at forest management practices. Now, when you talk about an individual refuge, be it the Arctic refuge or whatever, they're in terms of opening it up for drilling or what have you, those would be separate from the generalized forest management practices that the Fix Our Forests Act is targeted at.
Okay. Our second part I'm going to say to the question is, so Sierra Club does not support FOFA?
I believe they do not. That's a true statement. So, I know I went through a lot of comments during my portion. Somewhere I think I mentioned that CCL's position is not letting perfection become enemy of the good. And that's where, CCL has certainly taken a very detailed look at it. Excuse me. And, we conclude that while it's not a perfect bill, that the goods outweigh the negatives. But Sierra Club, I think, came to a different conclusion.
Okay. Mark is asking, where can we find out about the existing rebates? Rewiring America, I think. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm not
Which-
sure if Tim is more of an expert on this than I am, but
Yeah,
it's obviously
which
been a very
rebates-
changing landscape. So Rewiring America, I know for one, is a great resource.
So the Desire website and the AFDC focuses on transportation. Desire focuses on all, renewables, energy efficiency and EVs. They list and update every, all the activities, new laws. That's a very good website. But if you're talking about EV stuff in particular, upload the presentation, and the links I have are pretty comprehensive for electrification of transportation. I don't know what rebate areas this person is specifically wants to focus on.
Well, I think
Mark?
Citizens Utility Board and even ComEd have some interesting information on rebates, so possible.
Were you the one who asked, are you the Mark?
Yes, I think.
Mark's the mark.
Yeah, okay.
Mark's next question. What emerging technologies are coming soon that may help CC?
Well, and you already answered that, I think.
that was it,
So, yeah, we got that.
So Beth Ann is asking, how is this carbon initiative free going to interact with tariffs? Will this fee affect inflation?
Now, can you repeat that question real quick?
Sure. How is this carbon incentive free going to interact with tariffs? Will this fee affect inflation?
Mike, I can't say I fully understand the perspective of the question, but if there was a reference to I talked about 4 initiatives that are currently within the policy landscape that Washington is considering. One of them is that foreign pollution fee. I'm going to assume that that's what the question was intended towards. There's something like 28 industrial product groups that are within that Senate bill. So it's not like it's all encompassing, but the EU, for example, has really done because they are putting in place their border carbon taxes that have been reported on for the last 3 years that will actually result in penalties and payments starting in January. So they've done a very detailed analysis in terms of what is the actual carbon content of a particular industrial product group produced by a given country. So there's an awful lot of math involved in this thing. And that's how the Foreign Pollution Act has their basis in determining whether the importation of a product is resulting in something that's bringing in more carbon than if had the product been produced in the US. The ultimate effect on inflation, I don't think it would be terribly significant, in all honesty. I mean, there's so many tariffs that are already in place now that when you think about the potential for the tariffs associated with the foreign pollution fee, I would have to think that it pales by comparison compared to all the other hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs that are now going into effect.
Okay, Susan's question. Does SB 1325 account for the carbon pollution from shipping the product across the ocean versus the carbon pollution from trucking the product from a local factory?
Yes, I mean, the transportation is one aspect of it. I mean, it does try to measure the entire carbon footprint, if you will. And that's exactly what that bill is oriented around, is for those, and again, it's just a subset of industrial product groups, but for those that are within that subset, it makes an approximation as to what is the carbon footprint. For example, India is notorious in how much more carbon results from many products when they're made in India than when they're made in the US. So that bill 1325 would effectively try to capture the difference for that particular industrial product group between country A and the US. And then based on that fee, would assess a difference to represent the amount of excess carbon that got released into the atmosphere because it was made outside of the US.
And Tamara has a question and a comment, and it is lengthy, so bear with me. First off, she has said that the sponsor of the FPP bill is Senator Bill Cassidy, R. Louisiana, and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, D of Rhode Island. The question and or comment regarding the FPP legislation, this bill was carried over from the last Congress and revisions were made this year to gain support of stakeholders who objected to a preference and limitation for the compliance for countries who were part of a trade agreement with the US. This provision was removed to ensure there is variety across the globe. The US has the cleanest steel industry in the world. Other countries use antiquated production methods that result in emissions that do not comply with US standards. So I guess that is more of a statement. Would you like me to continue with the next question?
Sure.
Okay. Phyllis is asking, can you give a layman's description of the types of solar panel investment rebates, etc., we can get? I keep hearing that I can get XREX, not sure if that's spelled correctly, which will reduce the net cost of the solar panel investment.
What state is she in?
She did not say.
Because that's a state-driven. So Illinois actually has a really good SREC program,
Okay.
but it's not true across the board. And you can go out to, there's a website, that's srec.com, I think it is, and they basically will list entities. It's like a trading floor. That's a starting point, but the state has to have policy that supports it. And depends on what state. Illinois has a very robust SREC program, and they're actually talking, because of the loss of the tax credits, the solar industry is lobbying very hard to increase the SREC value for Illinoisans, but I don't know how that applies.
She's in Illinois.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good news. They're right now, I think the SRECs are at somewhere in the range of $70 to $80. And what in Illinois, when you put the solar in, as soon as you're energized, you apply to this srec.com and they will send you a check for 15 years worth of SRECs. It's awesome.
Sounds good. Okay, Nora is asking.
I assume that she understands how the SRECs are valued. Is that a fair statement?
Unknown at this moment. There's no outline on that. And could you possibly spell that for her just in case she needs the correct spelling?
SREC.
Okay, thank you.
It's basically for every megawatt hour you generate per year, you have one SREC and it has a value of somewhere around $75 in Illinois. So if you have 10, you get 10 times, say, 75, that's 750. And then you get 15 years worth, so 750 times 15, and you get that up front.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Sounds like it
It
is.
pays typically for 30 to 35% of the investment.
Okay. Nora's question. Trump is against clean energy. The GOP in Congress won't go against him on any issue. How do you see a bill actually getting passed?
Well, I'm not here as Mike Zanillo. I'm here as a representative of Citizens Climate Lobby, and I'll just say that we've got a whole dedicated team that lives in Washington and lives and breathes this stuff every day. And we think that there's some legitimate opportunities. So, I've had the benefit of going to Washington probably, I don't know, 12 times now. I probably have participated in over 80 lobby sessions. And, while I certainly appreciate the spirit of the question, I will tell you that when you actually go there and talk over a desk, either to a energy aide or an actual congressional person. Things my takeaway, and I'll tell you from the hundreds of people that come with me from CCL, you walk away sensing that things are not truly as polarized as conveyed by the media. Now, I know, that may generate a lot of smirks, but yet that's based on, hundreds of hours that we in CCL have talked to people, and that there are some legitimate opportunities. And in fact, a lot of that Republican blowback I was talking about earlier related to the big, beautiful bill and how many clean energy things it rolled back. Our folks that, are living in Washington, living, breathing this, which there are some legitimate opportunities to make progress.
Good to know. Susan's question, how much of the bus network in the Chicago area is electrified?
That's a hard thing to quantify, but I will say that it's happening. Pace has made some commitments and some procurement. They have, advanced and a good number of programs and projects. I don't have a count. And they're a big one in terms of who should be doing it. The whole RTA network, including Metra and Pace, and they have, how do I say, they have put their heads together in the last year, and they're trying to come up with a strategic plan. I know that the climate change lobby was very much a part of this. Mike, you might have, I don't know if you work with the team up in Highland Park, but they got Pace to change their direction from natural gas to electrification, and they've done something. Anyway, so I don't know the status. I just say there's some good stuff, good hopeful stuff. I don't know the current status. And that's the lion's share of what we'd want to do in Illinois is those groups. And I think it included paratransit. They were looking at the whole spectrum, and the board was on board, but the economics are tough. And there's also the some of the incentive dollars that came out of like the VW bill. They wanted a lion's share of that, and they didn't get it, so they had to go a different direction. But the commitment's there. It's a question of economics, I think. And they've got old diesel vehicles they have to do something with. So my sense is when they do new vehicle procurement, EVs are going to be on top of the list. Do you know anything about what the group in Highland Park is doing, Mike?
No, I don't. No.
Do you know Phyllis up there? Anyway, she's with CCL. So.
Okay. Mira's question. If you can't afford to put solar panels on your house, then what are your options?
That's a great question. The easiest thing is, again, if they're in Illinois, community solar is a no-brainer, good answer. You can save on the order of, depending who you talk to, but 15% on your annual energy costs just by signing up. So they basically take your electrons and use it to as a subscription amount in a given installation. That's and they basically have to get a certain number of subscribers before they'll start digging the earth. And once they do, then they will, as soon as it's up and running, you will get whatever electrons you've elected to offer them, which is typically whatever you use on a regular basis is what they will give you credit for. And they basically give you kind of a piece of the solar renewable energy credits, not all of it. And that's how you save money on your bill. Plus, the second choice would be to have a company like Sunrun, if you've got good sun, a third-party solar installer. They basically put solar panels on your roof. They own them, they operate them, they fix them if something goes wrong. You get the electricity. But they get the SREC values, they can write off the investment, the depreciation. It's kind of synergistic, and you save about the same amount of money, let's say 15% on your annual expenditures. And they kind of do everything for you. And you want to the key is make sure you get a good one, because I'm not sure they're all equal. And the people who keep an eye on it to do a good job is Cub. So Cub has a commitment to doing, keeping an eye on those companies that do that. If you're going to do that, you might even contact Cub and get some advice. And then the third thing that you can do is, I don't know if when the last time they've offered this program, it's a group buy. And Cub is involved in that too, where they go out and they negotiate a contract with one solar installer, and that company will offer a discount on the installation by gathering up, I'll say, at least 10 homes. And it's another one, again, Cub's directly involved in it.
Okay, Susan's question. When do you expect long distance railroad to be electrified?
The turn of the century. I have a friend who has electrified railroads. He did it, I don't know, he started probably 10 years ago. The railroads are the ones that they just don't want to change things. They're kind of an old boys network. The technology's out there, and I don't know why they're not doing it, other than they don't like being told what to do, and they kind of have a little control over the world they live in. I don't know, but it's very easy to. I mean, I've actually been on an electrified railroad, and it's very doable. Yeah. So.
All right. Anthony's question. California has a carbon cap and trade law. How likely is it to get policies like this implemented in other states?
There's actually two major, California actually participates in a multi-state cap and trade that I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, are several of the large West Coast states. And then there's one other one that I used to remember the name of. It's on the Northeast, that I think has like 13 states that are all part of a cross-state initiative for establishing a cap and trade. So I would venture to say that there's at least those two networks, if you will, which probably encompasses 20 some states. As far as that going beyond that, I'm not really aware that there's a lot of serious momentum beyond those two.
Okay, Mark's question. First, the statement. I was able to install an induction range. Tax rebate paid for the electric panel wiring upgrade. Question. What are the new developments in better batteries, getting away from lithium, etc.?
Well, I kind of touched on that. So the new developments are different chemistries. Another area that it's a tough one to sell. It is recyclability. And what that boils down to is getting the vehicle manufacturers to say, when we build a new, we build an EV, the battery pack will be easy to disassemble. We're going to plan to take it apart in 10 years or whatever. The OEMs have not embraced that. But that's from a recycling standpoint, because what they're now doing basically is they shred them and recycle them. Still it's a very small market, because the EVs are actually lasting a long time, and they're not being tossed out, or they're recycling, and then the batteries can be repurposed. But that's the direction I think it may head. But the key is to get the chemistry, to a point where it's the biggest thing in my mind is the fires. That's a really a bitter pill to try and figure out. and that's a change in the whole chemistry. It could be a change in how it's assembled and, and manufactured, but I think at the end of the day, they have to come up with better chemistry. Right now they have it, it's just really expensive. So, I'm hopeful that in particular, the solid state chemistry, which basically one of the problems with the lithium ions is when the problem that I see is if somebody, I don't know, drives over a bump in the road and they don't know it and they crack a battery case, you just need oxygen to get in and the lithium can start oxidizing. And that's when fires can occur if you get damage to the battery case. And if you had a solid state, it wouldn't matter because it wouldn't suddenly combust. That's what we need to get to, and they're all aware of it. It's just right now they're trying to, I don't know, survive the market as it is and get enough capacity that they can start making money and make it a viable marketplace. They're more concerned about that, and which makes sense to me. But I think if they can, that is definitely on the radar. The awareness of changing battery chemistries. Argonne is one of the world leaders in doing battery chemistry research. They have a whole team on trying to figure out some of these things. There's a consortium of 35 universities and a bunch of businesses, and they're working very diligently to answer the question of how to do this. And I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I'm very optimistic, but it hasn't happened yet cost effectively. So
is that having to do with sodium?
Sodium is one of the channels, different lithium chemistries. But yeah, sodium is one of the candidates. And part of it is, so there's the density of the recharge. So if you can have like the lithium phosphate battery, I think it will, you can't put in the same physical volume, you can't get as much energy stored. So that means that's one of the battlefronts, if you will. They want to make sure they're trying to reduce the volume of how do I say it? You want to reduce the costs, improve the reliability, and reduce the volume and increase the distance for the same physical volume. And those things compete with each other, and also the reliability and safety. So it's like a trade-off game. And my guess is somebody's going to come up with just a simpler way of doing this that's going to kind of solve more than one problem. And I've read some stuff that some people say they've already done it, but I've heard that before, and I don't, I'm a bit of a cynic, but I'm pretty sure somebody's going to figure this out.
I heard that MIT was working on an iron sulfur battery, but I haven't heard any more about it. But there's crazy stuff coming. So, Debbie?
Okay, thank you. Jennifer has two questions. We'll start with the first one. Is there any improvement in parts availability and access to qualified mechanics for these vehicles?
How do I answer that one? So, right after COVID, it was horrible for lots of industries. And the state of Illinois is going through an active training program to get more mechanics available for EVs in particular. I think the solar industry has been around, a fair amount longer, if that's part of the question. But and so I think there's a pretty robust solar group. The EV servicing the vehicles is, I think, right now it's a harder thing, and it's mostly the OEMs. They're trying to get it, like Joliet Junior College has a program and Triton has a program. We're still not quite there in terms of capacity, but it's a well-known challenge, and it's lagging. So that's kind of one thing. The parts, I don't think are nearly the problem they were. That's kind of what I was getting at about COVID. It just there's chickens and eggs, if you will, and people don't want to invest in training their people till they know they're going to use EVs and so it's but again, the state of Illinois has they have some training programs. They're subsidized. The unions are training people on the infrastructure side of things. So it's slower coming than I would like, but it's happening kind of at its own pace. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of my perception. The Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO, is kind of the keeper of the training programs. If you're interested in specific things that's going on, they have you can go to their website and there's a lot of resources, but I'm not sure are you just curious about the answer to the question, or did you want to participate? Whoever asked that.
Who asked that they could unmute? Who is it?
Yeah, let's see, hold on. That would be Jennifer Keeler. See, can you find her, Mark?
I can't.
Let me see.
What I say is if somebody were interested in, so they're actually looking for trainers. I've done some training under that program. I'm still doing it. And they have, they're trying to figure out, they don't even have a curriculum defined yet. Most of the training has come from the vehicle manufacturers for the vehicle side. And I can tell you, because I've worked with a lot of the chargers, that's like, it kind of falls under the refrigerator repairman skill set. It's not overly complicated. The vehicles, because it's got the high voltage and stuff, that's where we need more people trained, safely trained. I know like ComEd, they send their people to ComEd programs that they basically design on their electric vehicles. They work with the OEMs to come up with a program that satisfies their safety needs. So that's another example.
The maintenance requires are less too, aren't they? And what kind of maintenance are you needing?
Yeah, well, yes, the answer. So there's fewer moving parts, and it's what it boils down to is most of it's it's a vehicle. You got to change the tires every once in a while, and you got to put in new windshield washers, or wipers. But if something goes wrong with like the compressor or the high voltage wiring system, I had a volt and a squirrel ate through some of my cables, and I don't know if the squirrel got shocked or anything, but the point is it had to be replaced, and somebody has to know what they're doing because it's high voltage, and it's not like household high voltage. It's you wouldn't just let any mechanic do it, and that's so right now if something happens, the OEMs get involved. You wouldn't do it with a staff mechanic. You wouldn't go to a third party yet. For years when I had to repair a car, I would go to this guy I knew who knew how to fix cars, and now I go right to the dealership if anything happens. And I think that's the way now for repair. But I think we need more, like, if you will, community college level training so we get more people skilled.
Okay. Second question from Jennifer.
One other thing, Oakton is thinking of getting into this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Oakton, I think it's just called Oakton College now. They're thinking of getting into this kind of training program, if that makes any difference.
Okay, and then she says, how many amps does a charger need to be to charge one of these vehicles?
So as I showed in some of the slides, the level 1 is just household stuff. So you're looking at 10 to 15 amps. The level 2 is typically 30 to 50 amps. And that's really, otherwise the level 3, they're typically commercial, but you're in much, much higher power ranges. But for home use, you would use typically 30 to 48 amps. And if that's going to boil down probably, if this were in your home, you might be held back because of your panel capacity in your basement or whatever. That's one of the things that we look at when we do an installation is you may want a 48 amp, but you only have capacity for a 30 amp, for example.
Okay. Paula's question. It seems there is a high cost / damage to some countries that have the minerals that electric batteries need. Are there minerals that companies are researching that won't wreak havoc environmentally?
Absolutely. And that's a real, I'll say, touchy spot. Right now, it kind of, to me, the reality of that is it's a problem. It's kind of the blood diamond of EV charging. You've got cobalt and nickel, and some of the countries that are mining it, they're not very environmentally friendly or labor friendly. But the other part of this is that's complicating is that China is manufacturing a lot of the batteries in the world, or they're refining the materials that go into the battery. So where the abuses occur, or where the purchasing occurs, is often starts in China, and we don't really have a lot of influence there. But I was talking about these other battery chemistries, in particular, the solid state. One of the goals of the solid state is to have none of these tricky chemicals, in theory. So in other words, they would be much safer. They wouldn't have either the worker concerns or the long-term environmental impact. We're not there yet, but we're not. It's getting to, every year it gets to be a bigger problem because now there's 20 million EVs in the world, and that's getting to be a number that's going to start showing up in more statistics. So I think the United Nations has a group that's looking at this. I don't know what that means in the real world and how much influence they have, but it's a known problem or a known challenge. And to me, the answer is to change the battery chemistry. And we're just not, we're not quite there yet, but I think it's coming. I know that's not a good answer, but
if any of you saw the CBS Sunday Morning last Sunday, the Ford chairman was on, and he drives a Chinese EV because he wants to know what they're doing. And
I heard that.
remarked
Yeah.
that China's makes them, of course, they've got slave labor, but they could overwhelm the whole world market and put us all out of business here. So which is why Biden put 100% tariff on China's EVs, so we don't have them. But anyway, back to you.
Okay, should I go on?
Yes.
Okay. Mira's next question is, I have a Toyota 2016 wheelchair accessible minivan. I can't afford to buy another one. How do I get the greenest effect out of it?
So that's a really good question. I don't have a good pat answer, but my first thought is there are companies that do conversions. There's a organization called Fox Valley EV Club or something. They've been long proactive in this space. Mike, you may have run into them. But basically, I was out there and I saw they converted an old vehicle, but they're kind of hobbyists, and they could take, I'm guessing they could take your van and convert it to an EV or maybe a hybrid electric, whatever. But that would be an interesting thing, and it's something they would love to do, I think. If you're serious about it, I might be able to find your contact.
That's great. That would be very nice for Mira. Mark has a question again.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. There's legislation pending now in Illinois. What should we ask for? And that, Mark, is why I asked you What does it pertain to?
The grid, what is
The
it? The grid
grid.
bill, grid infrastructure bill, green, what is it? I think Tim probably knows. Anyway, I
I
know
don't know what they're calling it.
they're pending it. It's pending and they're working hard on it.
Um,
I think
been having hearings all year.
part of the problem is that it has a nuclear buy-in option to start putting money into nuclear again, but there's half the legislature says we don't want that. So I don't know what they can do, but it's a big bill for Illinois. So, but
Okay, we will go on to Amy's question. Mechanical problems with EVs, hybrids? Question mark?
I'll speak from mostly hearsay. I don't have statistics, if you will, but so I've had EVs for 13 years, 12 years, and very few problems mechanically. I've had a number of problems with software because they more or less, I mentioned this, they kind of clean sheet when they do these designs. They have the luxury of starting with a clean sheet of paper from a design standpoint. Anyway, and they ring out some of their designs with the customer, which is an old habit of companies. So when I first got my EV, I had a number of software issues, but they fixed them right up, and I haven't had any problems. So I work with some fleets in the Chicago area, and notably the Village of Oak Park. They've had EVs since 2016, and he doesn't. I'm talking to the fleet manager there. He almost doesn't pay attention to them because they don't go bad. He like says we don't have expenses with the fleet for the EVs. Which is these are the kind of people that would complain, and so he speaks very highly of the maintenance records. And what I'm saying is I've had issues with software, which is different than mechanical issues, but so I don't know, and that's I've heard other reports saying, yeah, the whole thing, no, the brakes last a long time. Some say the tires might not last as long because the vehicles are heavier, but it's marginal. I don't think anything else. Yeah, because think about an internal combustion engine. It's really a device that controls explosions. Every time that engine turns around, you have an explosion, and an EV doesn't have that. It's just a constant hum.
Right.
And I think that vibration, long term, it's a harder load on all the parts. So,
Right. So I know you'd kind of discussed the mechanics trained on this as well as having to go to the dealer. She asks, have to get oil changes, and I am looking at possibly the hybrid version.
yeah, you do with the hybrids, but so I had a Volt and I sold it. I think I had 50,000 miles on it. I changed the oil, I think 3 times, but I probably, out of 50,000 miles, I probably had 5,000 gasoline miles.
Wow.
That's I didn't use my gasoline engine very much. And if EV drivers, it's sort of a game. Now, if you take a trip somewhere, go to Michigan or Wisconsin, yeah, I filled up. But around town, I never did. So, so that's the question. Some people who they might drive a lot and they gonna say it's 50-50, then it's going to be like a gasoline vehicle. You've got spark plugs and you've got, belts and.
Okay, Tamara's question. I think, yeah. Tamara's question is, are there fire safety issues associated with the batteries? And if you charge at home, parentheses garage, does that result in an increase in home insurance for the homeowner?
It didn't for me.
Okay.
The insurance, and we got whatever Yeah, when I got the new car, well, it's a new car, so my rates went up, but there wasn't a ding per se because it was an electric vehicle. That's one part of the equation. The other one is like the village of Rosemont. I don't know if you all heard about the fire they had. They basically they had an electric vehicle fire or electric vehicle charger fire, and I've never heard the exact root cause, but my impression was that somebody brought a vehicle in that probably had a cracked battery and it caught on fire. And then they couldn't get the vehicle out of the garage, and they had to do all sorts of stuff. It was a big to do. And so now Rosemont does not allow it's EV charging in certain locations. You have to be able to extricate the vehicle in the event of a fire. So that's sort of a new wrinkle. But if you look at the statistics, there are per vehicle, there are still many more internal combustion engine vehicle fires than EV fires. So there's risk in everything, and that's not always a good answer. And as I said, they're trying to figure it out. They're not there yet, but hopefully they'll get there soon. But yeah, it is a risk with EVs. Fire's a risk.
Yeah. Okay, Alfeo's question. What companies are working on self-driving?
Everybody. So Waymo is the leader. Tesla's been doing it since, I don't know, for 10 years, but then they keep improving it. GM is now, their new products are coming out with an EV version. I'm sorry, an autonomous, or they call it something else. It's like sort of autonomous. They're not taking the full plunge, but they're basically, they are creating like if you're driving down the interstate, you can close your eyes and the car will take over. Tesla has something there's still some controversy, but I would say in 2 or 3 years it's going to be commonplace and it's going to work. And the one thing I don't know is if it'll work everywhere. That's to me is a kind of a big question. If you are, some of them, they have different technologies for like for the automation, and I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is depending on which one they have, they use visual, some use sonar, some use both. And the Waymo, which is the ones that they have in a few cities, they have like twice the sensors that a Tesla does, and they're twice as safe. They have redundancies. So it's gonna start seeing it more and more and more. I got to ride in one earlier this year, and it was really cool. So yeah, it's happening. Not in Chicago yet.
Yeah. We will ask Jolene's question because I know Bill needs to close down. So she is asking, well, I've been told that I can change dead cells only in my EV battery instead of buying a new one. Is this an urban legend? Is there an upside to this? And she is from Kansas.
I don't know. I mean, I have heard that there are some companies that have talked about that. I've not heard it done, but it might be being done. It's certainly a goal of the industry, but I don't know if it's real. I'd have to do a little research. I know, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that because there's a lot of questions that go into how to best do that, and I don't know if that's like a third party entity would do that or something. I'm not quite clear on how that would work, but
Okay,
I'm gonna have
Mark.
to do a little research.
All right, Mark and or Bill.
unmute. I know where there were some hands up. There's one hand up. Do we want to take it? Or are we going to close down? But first of all, I would like to thank Tim Millburn and Mike Zanillo for coming on. I think this is really good. We had a nice participation from people, and I want to have both of them, each of them, come back in the future individually. So we'll let them run their own show, and we'll get some updates then. So, Mike, thank you so much, and Tim, thank you so much. Bill, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, this was excellent. I didn't know what else could be said about EVs. Tim, you amaze me.
It's
And
my
Mike-
goal in life, Bill.
Yeah. And Mike, thanks for putting those goalposts and the green down there for the football field. That really made sense to me. Unfortunately,
I figured
it's
it
kind of
would.
like the Bears game. We're going backwards a little bit now. But on a real sense to the attendees, half of you are still on. I thank you so much. We will get out. It's going to not be tonight. It'll be tomorrow. We'll get out a recap, send it out to everybody who RSVP'd through Mobilize. We'll also have it out on our Substack. And we also have 2 events tomorrow. Actually, we have 3. We have our 9 a.m. coffee and conversation. Same web link that you use to get here. And then at 2:00, we have our how-to hands-on technology review. And that's just a group of us who are sharing what we've learned on Zoom, what we've learned on AI, what we've learned on Google Docs, the newest ways to make people a little bit more efficient in what they're doing every day in their leadership roles or their roles to help out in the various groups. That's at 2:00. And then at 7 p.m., we are sponsoring a IL 09. That is the Illinois 9th District, the one that Shikowski is retiring from. And we're going to have 13 of the 15 candidates on that call. And it's going to be fast paced and it'll be a lot of fun. We did the 08 a couple of weeks ago. We had 8. We thought that was a lot and it was fast paced, but it was very, very well done. And everybody respected each other. And we learned a lot about the candidates. So Sid is handling that for us, and he set up the 08. We're doing that in partnership with Indivisible Evanston and Indivisible Skokie and Morton Grove. So it should be a lot of fun and neat. Every day we're doing something new and exciting. So just keep dropping in and learning. Our goal, as we started out in the very beginning, was just to educate, to bring people who are professionals that can bring information out that's not biased, it's just fact. Thank you to our 2 presenters tonight. And Mark, thank you for lining this up. I know it takes a lot of work.
Well, easier for me, but I'm appreciative of Mike and Tim. So thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good
Okay,
night.
Good
take
night.
care.